Francis is visiting Philadelphia in September. Count on NBC 10 for complete coverage of his first visit to the United States.
Time and temperature sponsored by Cure Auto Insurance. Drive.
NBC 10 at Issue starts now.
The papal blizzard soon slams into Philadelphia, a chance to finally see Pope Francis. Now some fear that extra tight security will keep the pontiff too far from his flock. Has the city gone overboard, or are threats more real than we realize? That, plus a look at the Pope's message while he's here. Is he the political liberal some have suggested, or a leader who has no intention of changing church doctrine?
Good morning. I'm Rosemary Connors for NBC 10 at Issue. It's wheels down on Saturday when Pope Francis finally lands in Philadelphia, and law enforcement isn't taking any chances when it comes to security. Recently, the FBI foiled an alleged plot to harm the Pope, arresting a New Jersey teenager, and before that, the chair of the House Homeland Security Committee revealed that threats against the pontiff are real. Joining me now is security expert Matthew Horace. Matthew is the Chief Security Officer and Senior Vice President for FJC Security Services, a national security firm. Matthew managed national and international investigations while working for the U.S. Department of Justice. He also served as the special agent in charge of the Newark office of the ATF. Matthew Horace, thanks for being with us this morning.
Good morning.
So boxed off areas, fences, metal detectors, that's what we're going to see in Philadelphia. A lot of people have been talking about this. In fact, former Governor Ed Rendell said recently that it boggles the mind, his words, because the Pope has visited really dangerous countries without this much security. So, is it overkill?
No, I think we have to take these visits extremely seriously. The Secret Service does, the government does. As you know, this is a national special security event. So the resources that are being mobilized for this are unlike any that have been mobilized in quite some time. With the UN Assembly just completing up in New York, with the Pope's visit here, Cuba, and New York City, all boots are on the ground to make sure that he's safe, that the venues are safe, and that the public is safe.
Does this recent arrest of the teen in New Jersey, does this make those threats, the risk, that much more real?
Well, I think what you should remember is that we hear about the arrests, but you may not hear about all the other work that's done by the FBI and the intelligence agencies to mitigate risk, investigate, and surveil people who have made threats in the past or made threats very recently. The only ones you hear about are the ones that result in arrest. The public doesn't hear about all the threats that come in that are investigated by the federal government.
And ruled out.
And either ruled out or ruled in play.
So a lot of controversy about the fence. Some people think, as I mentioned, that it's overkill. Could it backfire in terms of crowd control and unrest in the crowd that may pop up?
Well, I think in terms of being security practitioners and law enforcement executives, we have to look at it like this. We can only control what we manage, and we can only manage what we allow access to. We don't want to create a situation where we have unwielding crowds and unwielding people and access, so we have to kind of control access in an environment like this.
What's going, I mean, you touched on this to some extent, but what's going on behind the scenes that we're not seeing and that may surprise us?
Well, there's a lot of planning that goes into place, months and years for visits like this. There's the strategic and tactical planning, working with the Philadelphia Police Department, the Pennsylvania State Police, and other local law enforcement. There's the government planning, the Secret Service following up on every threat, every lead, determining who's made threats against the Pope in the past or other government leaders in the past, who's recently incarcerated and let out of jail, who's done this, who may have purchased large amount of weapons or explosives and those sort of things. It all goes into play in evaluating intelligence behind the scenes. So while everyone's watching the movement of the Pope, there are people who are watching who might be interested in creating disruption or harming the Pope.
People you just mentioned, people who may have been in jail, people who may have made threats against the Pope in the past, people who may have purchased large amounts of firearms or explosives, things of that nature. These are people who are taking public actions. What about lone wolf attacks, people who may not be out there publicly, but may be planning something?
Well, certainly what we've seen over the past several months in the United States, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, a lone wolf attack, an active shooter incident. Security and law enforcement is about about making sure we understand the unknown, what may happen that we may not be aware of. So we have the combination of evaluating actionable intelligence, following up leads that we have, and trying to anticipate what we don't even know. That requires very harsh measures, and unfortunately, the public is inconvenienced by the security countermeasures that are put into play.
How difficult is it to try to prevent these kinds of lone wolf attacks?
Well, it's very challenging because you don't know what you don't know. So while we spend our time evaluating the information we do have, there's always that thing that we didn't anticipate. So in this case, again, the largest mobilization of resources that probably the U.S. has ever seen between the federal government, state and local, the military. Plans have been put into place, vulnerability assessments as to real-time, maritime threats, aviation threats, drones, restricting airspace, transportation, subways, buses. We're evaluating everything to make sure that the people who attend have a good experience, that the Pope gets in and out of here without incident, and that the venues are protected as well.
No stone unturned, so to speak.
There can't be any stone unturned for visits like this.
You mentioned state police, Philadelphia police, Secret Service. If you can, talk about the collaboration among those groups, that law enforcement, and also the Pope's own security.
Right. Well, in a case like this, obviously the Secret Service takes the lead in terms of the broad scope of what's going to happen. But it requires a lot of collaboration and coordination between all the law enforcement agencies that are and every one of them brings different resources to bear. There'll be tactical teams at the ready and prepared. There'll be explosive mitigation and explosive research and explosive people from the FBI and the ATF, the U.S. Department of State, the United States Marshal Service, the state police, Philadelphia police, transit police. Everyone will come together and play a role in ensuring that this thing goes off without a hitch. And remember, next visit, New York City.
All right. Matthew Horace with FJC Security. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Next on NBC 10 at Issue, interpreting the Pope's message. Some insight into what his words really mean and what religious leaders from other faiths hope to hear from Francis.